us for another episode of The Agent Investor. The goal of The Agent Investor is to help our audience make informed decisions through conversations with professionals involved in the commercial real estate space. So today we have a good friend of mine's, Aaron Frankel of Franklin and Frankel Law. Did I say the correct?
You got it.
Okay, Franklin and Frankel Law firm out of West Hartford, Connecticut. Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So Aaron and I have become good friends over, I'd say, the last year, and just through various events and in person and one-on-ones and things along those lines. So I figured I'd bring him on. We had a couple of really good conversations recently. We finally decided to jump on and handle this recording. So without further ado, Aaron, let's jump right into it. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you're involved in commercial real estate.
Yeah, so I am a lawyer right here in West Hartford, Connecticut, also the owner of my law firm, and we do a lot of commercial real estate transactions. So that's primarily how I'm involved. We represent buyers, we represent sellers, we represent people who are leasing and landlords also on lease negotiations. So it's a big part of many of the transactions that we're doing. We also represent business clients who are buying businesses, selling businesses, and a lot of other business law aspects. And so the commercial real estate just is both a standalone transactions, but also a part of a lot of the broader business transactions that we're doing. And so, when you work with our firm on that, you're working with me, you're working with typically with our business paralegal, Krista, as well. And so, and sometimes with Suzanne, the other attorney in the office. So this is the team. And, we are with clients from, typically working with a broker like yourself, especially if they're, usually on both sides from the letter of intent, term sheet phase, all the way up through closing, and then kind of whatever cleanup, hopefully not too much of that, but whatever stuff comes afterwards, right? So we kind of are there throughout the process as a member of the team.
Got it. No, absolutely. No, thank you, sir. All right, so we're going to get to it. And just, a lot of the conversation today is going to be focused around risk and also the acquisition side of, or the sales side of commercial real estate. But know that Aaron and his team, they handle all aspects of commercial real estate in terms of sales and leasing. So just keep that in mind. All right, so, when you look at a commercial real estate deal, where do you see most clients commonly underestimating risk?
Yeah, I mean, the things that kind of tend to come, big places to underestimate risk. Environmental is always the thing that we always talk about, that we're always worried about. And honestly, it does come up, right? Like it's a state that has older buildings, right? We never know what's going on in the ground, especially if you're working with a lender, right? The lender is going to want to see at least a phase one environmental study. Typically once you have that signed purchase agreement, and now we're getting into due diligence, it comes up. There are underground storage tanks. There is contamination sometimes. There are, properties that were once used as auto body shops, right? Like I honestly, sometimes I'm surprised at how often it ends up being an issue. And so just like it's sort of like the most obvious thing, but people should be aware that this is a thing that comes up. And so especially when you're working with a lender, environmental stuff just happens to pop it up and rear its ugly head. And so it's a problem that we need to solve as a part of due diligence. That's one thing. I'm just trying to think of some other interesting things that have come up recently. Yeah, understanding like who you're buying from and what you're buying, right? Like sometimes we've seen a couple of things recently where someone thought they were buying an actual property, but they're actually just buying an interest in the entity that owns the property. Issues with buying, when you talk about sort of like the challenges of dealing with a seller, like when you're a buyer, right? Or even if you're a seller, right? If you're dealing with a property or an entity that owns property owned by multiple people, now you're dealing with a couple different people who have a couple of different ways of looking at the deal, of looking at the right price, of looking at the right deal terms. So that can sometimes be a thing that gets in our way of closing when different people have different ideas about how that's supposed to look. So just a couple of things that come to mind as far as recent hurdles, recent risks that are standing in the way of closing.
Got it. No, absolutely. And one thing I'll jump on, just to reiterate for our audience who's not familiar. So when Aaron mentioned the environmentals and the phase one. For those who don't realize or know about it, you generally a phase one will come first, and then a phase two will follow. A phase one is generally, and correct me if I'm wrong, is generally a report or a study on a property versus physical assessment of the property. I mean, there may be some physical of a walk around, but not necessarily penetrations or of any kind. And if through that phase one there is some kind of discovery, maybe like you said, an oil spill or is a past gas station or oil tanks, then there may be a phase two that's required that may require digging into the ground a bit just to sample oil, soil and things along those lines. Is that
Yeah, you got it exactly right.
okay?
Yeah. So the typical diligence terms on a deal are going to say that, once we sign this purchase agreement, the seller is going to provide whatever existing reports they have, whatever, if there have been inspections done in the past, they're going to give that over. And then based on what we find in those documents, maybe there's going to be more, maybe there won't. Based on what we know about the property, there will be more, maybe not. Yeah, the phase two, now we're getting into something a lot more expensive, right? And so that's when we start to question, like, is this thing going to happen? Because now we're looking at whatever $10,000 worth of, digging and testing and whatever it is. So that is when we start to see impediments. Clients start to say, well, can I find a different lender who maybe doesn't require phase two? Like,
Yeah.
we that's when things get a little more complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. And in today's time, and it's now almost mid 2026. With the Transfer Act moving on to the release regulations, it's a whole
Right.
abbreviation. A lot of owners and transactions, they kind of don't want to touch that phase two because it may open up a can of worms that may ultimately really affect the seller. So it's even more challenging now to even kind of touch that. And we're still fresh into that whole process. So we'll see where that goes as we progress through that. But that's definitely been a conversation in my circles about, do we do this or do we not do
That
this?
exact issue just came up
Yeah.
on a deal I was doing. It was basically that we got to a point on this deal where it had all these unique things where it was, multiple owners, and there was potential contamination for like 19. No one knows. It was very potentially old. There was a study from 1990. No one had ever done any work. The ownership interest had just been kind of passed down from owner to owner without ever a study or a loan. And so now we got to this point where I'm telling my client, like, it seems like there is something we could be concerned about. The bank says the same thing. But the seller's attorney is like, well, I may not even want to let my clients do a study because based on the new rules, right? Like, this could be opening them up to liability that they potentially wouldn't otherwise have. So ultimately, it didn't come to that. But there are all sorts of new considerations there. We could do I'm sure we could do a whole episode on the Transfer Act, and you probably want to have someone who's actually an environmental lawyer on to do that with you. But it's an interesting one in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get off that because, like you said, we could
Yeah.
be on that for an hour. So, all right. So, you started your career in litigation, or you were in litigation as part of your career. How has the experience changed the way you approach, drafting agreements today?
Yeah, I guess I think about it as in I spent a couple of years scrutinizing contracts from the perspective of how can we pull, how can we get the best possible thing from our client in this zero sum situation, right? Like, how can we win? Now I do something a lot different, which is everyone's pulling towards the same result. We want to close a deal. But it was really helpful for me to have that experience and know how contracts get scrutinized under a microscope when things go wrong, right? So it really informs the way I would draft, the way I try to protect clients, the way I try to leave issues completely unambiguous, right? Like, I do not, we as lawyers, we don't want ambiguity. We don't want contracts to say things that aren't clear, right? Even if it's not, if it's something that our client doesn't want to give on, but we ultimately have to give, we need it to be crystal clear what everybody means. Otherwise, there's just risk of something happening that we don't anticipate down the road if things ever go wrong. So that's like that was my big takeaway from that sort of career path.
Got it. Got it. So, just to reiterate that a bit. So really it's making sure a contract is not left too generalized where it could lead to legal issues down the line stating, you said this, but you said this, but really, and it was never quite clear on who was the responsible party, whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's like in best case scenario, right? Like, hopefully, we do a deal, we sign a contract, we close, and then we never ever look at the contract again, right? Like, that's hopefully most deals go that way. But as soon
Most
as
do,
things
yeah.
aren't going that way, everyone's looking really closely at the contract, right? And that's why you want to have a lawyer. Like you don't want someone who's going to over lawyer it. Like it doesn't need to be 100 pages. If it's if we're talking about a $500,000, 3-unit office building, right? We don't need a 100-page contract. But at the same time, we do want to make sure everything's clear. Everyone's protected. Everyone knows exactly what their responsibilities and rights are. And so you want a lawyer who knows how to capture that stuff clearly, succinctly in a contract.
Got it. So I'm going off our normal questions here. And how do you when you go into say you're representing a client, what's the balance of represent like it being strongly in their favor versus it kind of I know you made the comment about how you kind of try to make it good for both parties the contract, but I'm assuming are you primarily concerned with your client making sure they have all their protections in place?
Yeah, I mean, my thing is I want them to be able to get as much as they possibly can out of it, right? Like my number one job is to understand what my client wants, right? Like I got to understand what they want so I can try to deliver them the agreement that they're looking for. And then there's the flip side of that is I need to help them understand how they're probably not going to get everything that they want, right? And so, we want to identify what the most important things are. So if it's a choice between, 5 things, right? Like let's focus on the 2 that we absolutely must have, and then the others that are like nice to haves, we might have to give those up at some point. But yeah, I mean, we're going to push. I mean, this is kind of in conjunction with your role, right? Like you are working on the letter of intent or offer, whatever it is, and so we try. If there are things we know our clients want, right, we want to get those out right up front because why would we want to go all the way down the road of drafting a purchase agreement, paying lawyers to do it if we can't even agree on those big ticket items off the bat, right? So that's why we do a letter of intent. That's why we start out with a term sheet. And then, hopefully when we're actually drafting a purchase agreement, we've gotten so many of those big ticket items out of the way that the stuff that we're fighting about isn't really that significant, isn't really, there aren't too many actual deal points there. Obviously, we can't always achieve that, but we try as much as we can to figure out what we must have and what's a nice to have.
Yeah, no, that's a good comment about kind of the relationship or the similarities between the contract and the initial offer that we put out. Because the truth is, while the same thing, a client may ask for 5 things, but we may say, hey, you may not be able to get a 500-day due diligence period. We may have to bring that down a bit, or your deposit can't be $500. It has to be so. Even though you want to protect them, you also want to make it reasonable so your clients are not, the other side is not looking at us like we're fools. We don't know what we're doing.
Right.
So we want
Yes,
to put
this is one of the big things, right? Yeah, it's like trying to help clients and say, okay, I hear you want this thing. This is pretty far outside of the norm. So they're probably gonna say no. I can still ask for it. Like I'm here to do what you want, but I'm gonna tell you that like probably gonna say no. And if you must have this, then like it might kill the deal. So like let's just all be upfront here about like what is realistic, right? Yeah. That's all.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation as well.
Yeah.
All right, no, cool. So moving along, if you had to narrow it down, what are the top 3 legal considerations, in a commercial, purchase sale transaction, you would say?
Let's see. So if you're buying a place, right, that's got tenants, right? So we want to see like what do the leases say, right? Like let's make sure our leases are assignable. Let's make sure you can get what you think you're getting. Let's make sure that we can get estoppels for all the tenants, right? Like if you're buying to be renting out to other people, like those are the things we want to make sure that stuff is all right. I mean, just generally like reps and warranties, right? So this is the thing that no one wants to pay any attention to, but is a huge part of what a buyer is getting and what a seller is giving, right? Things that the seller says are true about the property as of a certain date. And so if anything goes wrong, that's how we protect the seller. And when we're representing, I mean, that's how we protect the buyer. And when we're representing the seller, right? Like that's what we focus on to try to limit those as much as we possibly can to protect our seller as well. So those are things like as lawyers, it's a big part of what we do and a big part of what we try to help people, understand. Other big takeaways, I guess I would say, trying to help navigate that relationship with a lender, with a bank. That's another big part. Just like understanding the deal terms you're getting from the bank too, right? That's a big part of what your cash flow is going to be based on, interest rates, just like, who who can own the property, when can you sell it, when can you assign it, all that stuff, right? Like it's a big
Mm,
part of it. And then the other thing, and this isn't necessarily a deal term, but it's a big piece of what we work with clients on, is like when you have business partners, the deal is not just about getting the purchase right, but it's also about making sure that you, if those are new partners for you, it's making sure that business relationship is right between you and your partner. So structuring the business side of the relationship is a big part of what we focus on through an operating agreement, or if it's a shareholder agreement at a corporation. So I don't know, those are the sort of the things. I mean, obviously, like there's all the terms of the agreement are important, but those are some things I think that maybe people aren't always thinking about, but it's a big part of what we're doing for clients as attorneys.
got it. Oh, very good. And kind of moving to this next one. This is a personal selfish question that I had. So you and I had a conversation recently, and I asked, one thing that drives me crazy about some attorneys is that they seem like they're trying to do everything. And some of them, I submit a LOI or something specific to commercial real estate, and it takes them forever to process it, way beyond what the normal timeframes are to get things done. And it becomes very obvious that they've never done this before. I'm sure they've done it before, or recently, and they don't do it very often. And my question, is why, why does it, why are some attorneys very fast and some not so fast? I mean, I kind of answered my own question, but what is that all about? How does that happen?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's got to be a couple of different things, right? Like, so I mean, I think
I know
there's
you don't want to
some.
talk bad about other attorneys either.
No, I think it's
Yeah.
just like people are busy and maybe they don't have the systems or the staff to help process everything they've got going on. That's definitely a thing that happens, and everyone, we have our crazy times and our less crazy times. But that could be I think that sometimes some attorneys have sort of like practice areas that are maybe a little bit incompatible with each other. Like, you got to be in court all the time, and that kind of makes it hard to be, to your point, like responsive
Yeah.
when you're going to have to be in court all day or 2 days, whatever you're doing litigation and transactional work. Sometimes that makes it harder to be so on top of the communication, because we know, and it's like when we're talking about the deal flow, like there are just times when things need to be moved along, right? We need to get things moved along because delays kill deals, right? And so that could be it as well. I don't know, maybe it's just personal style, lack of organization. I'm not really sure. Like for us, for me, everyone on my team knows that like responsiveness is the biggest thing. I mean, quality work and getting things done is the biggest thing, but like responsiveness is right there. Like, you don't have to have the answer. You don't have to have the product done within an hour, but you should at least acknowledge receipt of an email, acknowledge that you're working on it. Give people, set expectations ahead of time about when things are going to happen. For me, that is incredibly important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's just in my space, I find it challenging because many times clients that I work with, especially like older clients, they tend to have attorneys that they've been working with for everything for the past 30, 40 years. But again, we get into it with the commercial transaction, and it's just the pace is just so slow. And then unfortunately, so I struggle to not struggle, but to introduce my sphere to these new clients and try to have them try a new attorney or use a new attorney who's familiar with this space. So just a constant struggle as I go through clients, and more times than less, unfortunately, a lot of times the attorneys turn out not. They tend to be a little slower than I'm used to. But that was just the question I had that I know others deal with at times.
It's funny. It's like business transactions and commercial real estate transactions look a lot alike as far as how the purchase agreement is structured, the amount of diligence that goes in, and all that. There's a lot more lawyers though that are doing commercial real estate transactions than business transactions for whatever reason. And so I just think you get a wider variety, to your point, of like the people who are doing it, experience levels, familiarity with different situations. And so I think that's you get a lot of different types of folks, just like get a lot of different types of landlords out there, right? You get everything from the gigantic like national corporation that owns property in 50 states, and mom and pop who are using the same lease that is like a PDF from 1985. Like literally, like we see both of those in equal parts, right? It's just, there's a lot of variety.
Yep, well, that's a good way to say it. All right, cool. So we're kind of moving into more of the personal question here. You're deeply rooted in the local community. You're in West Hartford currently. How do you personally define success in the work that you do?
Yeah, so I think to success for me, I guess I want to think about like from a business perspective and like the personal perspective, right? Like business wise, like I went into business for myself to get out of the grind of the big law firm life, right? I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to be able to, have a relationship with my own clients on my own terms rather than somebody else's. And so it's really on the business side, it comes down to a couple of things. It's like, are my clients satisfied and feeling like they got what they were looking for with our firm, like excellent service, excellent communication, and hopefully a good result? Is my staff, is like, are the people I work with happy and feeling fulfilled in what they do? I'm not trying to grow into a massive firm, but are we like growing in the ways that I want, like getting better at what we do, developing better systems? Those are things that I'm looking at. And then on like the personal side, right? Like getting back to like my why, like why did I get into this? It's like, am I also creating time for my family? To be with I have a daughter who's 3.5. My wife lives here in town too with us. Obviously, like making sure that we have time for all the other things that I want to be doing in life, which kind of motivated this whole transition for me in the first place. So I guess I think about success both on the personal and professional side of things. Just having the time to live the kind of life I want to.
Yeah, I like it. Great answers. Great answers. So when you're not doing your work or in your business, operating in your business, so what are some of your hobbies? What are things you enjoy doing?
Yeah, I mean, these days I do a lot of parenting. I'm playing with a 3.5-year-old a lot, and that's great. Honestly, I love that. I try to also find time to run, hike, you know, when I have time, do some cooking around the house. Every now and then I find time to do some reading, 5 to 10 minutes before bed, whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Reading
really.
that's not contract, I mean. Yeah, those are the big things. I love to be outside. I love to be physically active, whatever it is, biking, running, hiking, like those are big things for me. So I try to find time to work those things in as well. But yeah, that's my life these days.
Like it, like it. All right, so we're wrapping this up now. So before we take off, do you have any final words for our audience?
No, I mean, I think the big thing is work with professionals when you're doing a transaction. So like, you know, you can do a deal without a broker, but it's going to be way harder, and it's going to be you're not going to understand the deal as well as you otherwise would. You're not going to understand like if you got the right price as you otherwise would. That's a professional you should work with. Work with an attorney who does commercial real estate, right? Like who does
Absolutely.
commercial real
Please.
estate, right? And same on the
Please.
broker side, right? Like that's going to help you protect you, get the deal that you want. Work with a CPA who understands commercial real estate, right? Like that's like
Yeah.
it is. If you're gonna be investing in something, like really invest in it, right? Like pay a little bit more to bring on some professionals who are gonna help you be protected, understand what you're doing, and get this off on the right foot. It's gonna make it way more likely that your deal closes and you get the deal you're looking for.
Absolutely. You get what you pay for,
Yep.
long story
Yep.
short. Sure.
Yep.
All right, cool. And so, for our audience, I will be sharing Aaron's info, his links and URLs in the post. So just keep an eye out for that. So, so that's it. So I want to thank you, Aaron, for jumping on today. It was a great conversation. And as always, I look forward to continued conversations moving forward. And to our audience, thank you all for joining us for another episode of The Agent Investor. We want to wish you all the best in your health and happiness, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, everyone else.
Thanks, Brandon.